If you're somebody who takes photos of pets, this is how I use Adobe Lightroom to edit my pet photos as a professional pet photographer. Let's go. Adobe Lightroom is one of the most popular softwares for photographers around the world, whether they're pet photographers or wedding photographers or whatever. If you haven't heard of Lightroom, that is the program that I start all of my edits in before moving to Photoshop. It's incredibly powerful because you can organize all your photos there and do a whole bunch of edits on the raw file itself. I am not a salesperson for Lightroom, but I've been using it for years and years now, before I was even professional. So it's obviously a really great software. There's a reason it's so popular, and today I'm going to show you how you can edit pet photos in Lightroom, what its best features are, and at the end I'm going to take you through a little bit of an editing tutorial to show you how all those pieces kind of come together. So make sure you stick around for that. We're going to be working on this little photo of Loki here. And yeah, doing a little bit of an edit on that just in Lightroom, because I really love working in Lightroom to start my photos before going a little bit more crazy in Photoshop. Let's go. So this is the main develop module area, and you have here all of these global edits. Everything here is going to affect everything in your photo. So for me, this can be a little bit problematic because most of the time when I'm editing, what I want to do is I want to bring more attention to the dog or the subject and less attention to kind of everything else. And if I'm doing something like a global edit, everything I do is going to happen to everything in the photo. So if I'm thinking like, okay, I want like a bit more clarity on Loki's face, so I'm just going to pull some more clarity here, but now I have all this clarity on the moss and maybe in the background, depending on the photo, and it might have put more clarity on Loki, but I probably don't want all this clarity in the grasses or the moss necessarily, or all the trees and stuff in the background. So usually here, one thing is going to work in my favor and the other thing is going to kind of be contrary to what I'm wanting to achieve. So in general, I actually don't use a lot of the features in this section in most of my edits. One thing that is really super great though, and I kind of jumped ahead a little bit, but hey, ADHD brain, what are you gonna do, is the white balance section here. Now Loki is really easy to set the white balance on for two reasons. One is that I can use this handy dandy eyedropper tool here to drop right in between his little stripe where it's pure white fur. This only works when you're targeting areas of pure white, pure black, or pure gray. So your kind of bluey gray staffy or something is probably not going to be ideal for this particular tool, because basically what it's saying is, hey Lightroom, whatever you're sampling right now should be pure white, black, or gray. Even a black dog isn't generally pure black, and you can see because of the lens I used here, I also have some purple fringing going on. So potentially that's going to mess with the color as well, but you can click around, try some different areas. In general, I choose between the eyes because you're going to have the least amount of color cast there. And Lightroom's going to pick up the colors for you automatically. The other option is to pop your vibrance and saturation all the way up with your black dog or white dog or whatever. Have a look at what colors are going on. If he's looking a little bit cool, we could probably warm him up a bit. And now he's looking somewhere in between blue and yellow. So that is probably a great color for my black dog. Everything here kind of adjusts what it says that it adjusts. So your highlights are going to adjust your highlights. This photo doesn't have a heap of highlights. If you look at the histogram, the main thing we have is shadows. So if I were to pull this up, I would probably get a lot more detail in the shadows, and you can see that really clearly from Loki. Generally, I wouldn't do such a big edit on shadows, but I kind of don't mind what it's done there. But, you know, that'll adjust the shadows. This will adjust the whites, make the whites brighter, make the whites darker. Of course, how you want to slide these sliders is totally up to you and your style. I have my very set process and the way that I do things and why I do things. Your style and your way of doing things might be completely different. You know, that's why I don't like necessarily throwing editing tutorials out there all the time, because it'll work for this photo, it'll work for my style, it'll work for the fact that this is underexposed, but it won't work for a super happy, bright summer beach photo, for example. So you have to find your method for the photo that you're working on. Otherwise, it won't make sense. So there's no point. Tone curve I don't use. It affects the whole photo. It's not my favorite thing. I would rather use curves in Photoshop. The HSL panel can be a little bit interesting. There is a video on using the HSL panel and using my favorite color changing tool in Photoshop. Either it's out now or it will be out at some point in the future. It depends on how everything goes together, because what even is time? But here I could, for example, change the color of the moss a little bit, make it a more cyan green, turn down the saturation, kind of whatever I want to do there. We'll leave that for the little step-by-step when we get to it. Color grading I definitely don't use because it colors my dog, and I want my dog to be his correct color. In this case, I would have a very pinky purple dog. Even if I turn this right down, he would still have hints of that color in his fur. Noise reduction is a great one in Lightroom, and I definitely use this quite often. Knowing that this is an ISO 2500, thank you very much, Sony, I'm probably going to be seeing some noise once I lighten it up, so I might as well put the noise reduction up a little bit now, and we can come back and add a bit more later. Like I said, there's definitely some chromatic aberration or fringing. You can see the purple in his fur. So I can click remove chromatic aberration, but it really didn't do anything, so I think I'm gonna have to add it myself. Somehow we've already started the little editing tutorial, but that's fine. So I'm just adjusting these until I see the purple and green tones have kind of disappeared. With Loki, it's not such a big deal that it's going to affect something else, but with Journey, it is. So you have to keep an eye out depending on the color of your dog. The other really important parts of Lightroom for me are the crop tool, and you can also twist this to fix the horizons if you don't take your photos straight, which most of us don't. You can also change the aspect ratio of the crop. And my favorite tools are all found here in the masking section. So here I can do a bunch of selective edits. This is where I can brighten the dog and add more detail on his face. I can darken parts of the background. I can change little colors here and there. I can work on the eyes. Pretty much everything I want to do, I can do here. So let's work on this photo kind of from start to finish, but I've done the white balance already, so I'm going to leave that where it is. Before I do that, if you're enjoying this video, please make sure that you like it, subscribe it, give me a comment. I love hearing from you guys. It's always really inspiring if you're like, I love this video, I'm learning so much, for me to keep making videos and put some energy into it. So if you want more pet photography, editing, chaos, ADHD stuff, just cute pictures of pets, please let me know in the comments, and I will keep making them for you, because otherwise I'm making videos for myself and it's not that much fun. Let's go. We've got the white balance. Let's have a look at the global adjustments here. I think I could probably just pop the exposure up a little bit if I'm looking at my histogram. I've got plenty of room to move. I think I was just getting a little bit worried about the highlight spot in the background. I am going to bring the highlights down just a little to make sure his nose doesn't get too bright, and I'm going to pull the shadows up to get a little bit more detail in his face, but I don't want him to go gray and all washed out, so I'm not going to go crazy. Sweet, now we're going to go over to the radial section, and now is where I want to work on the two parts of my image, so toning down some stuff in the background and making my dog more visible. Before we do that, I'm going to come back to the global adjustments and change the HSL so we can get that nice kind of moss color that we had before. So bring in the green more towards cyan, drop in the saturation, and I already like that color more. We could also potentially look at the oranges, but it does affect Loki's eyes, so I think we'll just stop there for now. Into the masking section, I'm going to make a radial and pop it over Loki's whole face. Now I can raise the clarity and texture, and that's already going to make his face look a lot sharper. We can also zoom in and have a look at some of these places that have gotten a little bit dark, like his ears here. Make a new radial filter. You can use a keyboard shortcut, which is Shift and M. Now we could raise the shadows a little bit in his ears to stop that being such a black hole. And we can maybe also work on his eyes here as well. Now look, I'm not loving the color of his eyes. I think that is from working on the oranges here, so I'm just going to put them back to where they should be. Shift and M to make another radial. Let's put it over his whole eye, pull up the clarity, and I'm gonna pull up the whites as well. That's gonna brighten the bright parts of his eye, hopefully without affecting the pupil too much, because I want that to stay nice and dark. I'm using another keyboard shortcut now, which is Shift, Option, or Alt and M. That's gonna make a new radial with the same effect. So you can see here's my whites and my clarity from the other eye, and I'm gonna put it over this eye too. Cool. While we're here, let's work a little bit on the catch lights. So dragging this over here, raising the whites to make those catch lights nice and bright, and pulling down the saturation to keep them nice and clean. Shift, Option, and M to make a new one with the same effects, and we're gonna put it over this catch light. Okay. This pupil is looking a little bit washed out to me, probably from pulling up the shadows earlier, so I'm gonna drag another radial over there and just drop the shadows to keep them nice and clean and dark. They really do look better when they're dark. Okie doke. This side of his face is looking a little bit darker, but I mean, it was naturally, and it was really dark in the woods. So I don't need to match it to the lighter side, but I do just want to brighten it a little. So I'm just gonna raise the whites there, and that will probably be fine. Here we have a little bit of color cast on his nose, just from the light bouncing off of the moss. So I'm just gonna drop the saturation there. It's always worth looking out for color casts, like the blue on the top of his nose or the yellow in his paw, and just taking those color casts out to keep things nice and clean. If we were to have a look now at the background, we've got a bit of a highlight spot here, so we can drop the highlights just in that spot. And now we can even close in our image a little bit using radials. So if I draw a nice big one here and invert it, that's gonna flip it to working on the outside. If I press O on my keyboard, everything red is going to be affected by this mask. You can change the feather so it's a little bit less affecting low key, and I just want it to kind of come to the bottom of his chin. O on my keyboard to hide the overlay, and I'm just going to lower the saturation. Again, where you do this, how much you do this, what you do exactly, all really depends on the photo that you're working on. But in this case, I would do something like that and have a look. We've kind of closed in the bottom and sides of the photo now. Might even just move him this way. Cool. I want to put a little spotlight on his little head now, just to draw your attention a bit more into Loki here. So I'm going to put a radial on top. Maybe fan out that feather again a little bit so it ends a bit softer. And I'm just going to pull the exposure up. I'm keeping an eye on his stripe so that it doesn't go too bright. And I'm going to remove this radial effect, this exposure that I just added from this focus spot, because I literally just lowered the highlights there and I don't need it to be that bright now. So let's have a look. I would say that for a really quick walkthrough, we've done a big change to this photo. It's definitely not perfect, but you know, you can see how much more detail we have in Loki's face and his eyes even. We can definitely see him a lot better. We've taken the distraction out of this bokeh spot a bit. I would probably want to reduce the noise a little bit more. So let's come down to the noise reduction section, pull up the detail slider to get some more detail back. If we want to remove this little eye booger here, we can come over to the healing panel, maybe grab the little band-aid, and just kind of go over this little section. It's pretty small, so you can see, I think that that will be totally fine. And I could do that with all the rest of the dust as well. And I could keep kind of going like that. I could change sort of the colors in amongst this moss here, but for me, for right now, that is a pretty good place to leave it, because we've managed to add a whole bunch of radials in a really short amount of time and make a really big change to this edit. And this is what I mean when I say that Lightroom is a really powerful tool, particularly to start your image. And I could take it on to Photoshop from here and do a lot bigger edits. So this is such a simple photo that I probably wouldn't want to go overboard with edits anyways. I would probably just emphasize that vignette, do a little bit of dodge and burn, maybe shift some of the colors a little bit more towards like a reddish brown and the cyan green, because I think that's really pretty. But otherwise, this is almost looking how it would finish up just through using Lightroom. That's it for today. I hope you found it really interesting and useful. And as always, I would love to see the photos that you guys create. So if you're using these tutorials and posting things on Instagram, make sure you tag me over there. I love to see your work. And yeah, get into Lightroom and don't ignore those masking tools. They are super useful and they give you so much more flexibility because you can edit really specifically based on what your photo actually needs instead of editing the whole thing, everything, all the time. That's it for now. Until next time. Bye everybody.